I am for the child who's had 7 addresses in a single year because she's in foster care, because her father abused her. And her mother couldn't believe her. She is the child I am for. I am a volunteer child advocate. I am you.
Florida residents call toll-free 866-341-1425.
Tap rooms are localized and they're geographic. The Hispanic community is much broader than one tap room. So what we decided to do was come out with a high-quality craft beer, 2 high-quality craft beers that appeal to the Hispanic taste and that we can distribute in all the Hispanic neighborhoods. Taino is a very light, refreshing beer. It's a social beer that you can drink probably for a good part of the evening, and it'll give you a nice light feeling. It's not a heavy beer, it's very airy, and it's very light. It's a 4.5 alcohol, which is low for beer. The Boricua is a 6.0. Now that's a stronger beer, and we designed it to be a little bit stronger than Heineken. Heineken is a favorite in the Hispanic community, so we have a little bit more muscle than Heineken. Boricua right now, in a very short amount of time, it's been a miracle for us because we've gotten a large range of acceptance at the retail level. We're in Publix, we're in ABC, Target is picking it up, we're in Sedano's, we're in Bravo's, 7-Elevens are picking it up because they're concentrating more on craft beer and the Hispanic market. So what we're trying to do is do a quality beer, a high quality beer, more taste, and that the Hispanic community will like. Step up to craft beer. Taino Light Lager has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean-style flavor. Boricua Craft Ale, full-bodied flavor for the true beer drinker. Stop drinking beer water. Taino Craft Light Lager and Boricua Strong Craft Ale. Feel the rhythm and come up to craft beer. Hi, I'm Danny Ramos, and I have the privilege of very few people. I'm able to speak to you directly on a TV station. I'm not affiliated with any major network, so I don't have a political agenda in what I say. For example, if you're on Fox News, everyone knows that Fox News leans Republican. And CNN, ABC, CBS, MSNBC, they all lean Democratic. It seems that there are very few medias today that actually present the news on a factual basis without manipulating the editorial content or giving extra time to a particular subject which leans in a particular predetermined direction in order to get a particular outcome. We have a small show, I-4 Corridor. We're highly political. We tell it the way it is, and we are on Spectrum every Tuesday night at 9:30. And I am privileged that I can speak to you directly and give you these words. There is no media that's truly objective in the U.S. mainland right now. You are either Democratic media or you're Republican media. And that creates a very terrible agenda for the American public, because many times the issues that are really, really important to us don't get exposed at the level that they should be exposed. Charlottesville, terrible situation. The fault of the judge who allowed the 2 parties to get together in a park at the same time. That decision was made by a federal judge. The mayor of that town also supported that federal judge in allowing those 2 different ideological groups from facing each other. The only person who was actually against it was the police chief, and he vehemently was against it. And the mayor also gave a stand-down order to the police department so that the police did not react regardless of the situations. The result was 1 person was dead. It's a terrible situation. But let me give you a more terrible situation that we've gotten so used to it that nobody cares. Last weekend, 9 people were murdered in Chicago. A total of 33 were shot. The weekend before, another dozen people were murdered and another 25 people were shot. It's an ongoing saga, an ongoing situation in Chicago, that every weekend there are mass murders going on and mass shootings. There are more people have died in Chicago right now than in Afghanistan. So what are we doing? What's the Congress of the United States doing in order to make this go away? Instead, because there's no political agenda there. So they don't pay attention to it because there is no political benefit to come out of it. So What we want to do is we want to bring to you a discussion, which will happen right after my commentary, about what's going on with racism in this country. Tap rooms are localized and they're geographic. The Hispanic community is much broader than one tap room. So what we decided to do was come out with a high-quality craft beer, 2 high-quality craft beers that appeal to the Hispanic taste and that we can distribute in all the Hispanic neighborhoods. Taino is a very light, refreshing beer. It's a social beer that you can drink probably for a good part of the evening, and it'll give you a nice light feeling. It's not a heavy beer, it's very airy, and it's very light. It's a 4.5 alcohol, which is low for beer. The Boricua is a 6.0. Now that's a stronger beer, and we designed it to be a little bit stronger than Heineken. Heineken is a favorite in the Hispanic community, so we have a little bit more muscle than Heineken. Boricua right now, in a very short amount of time, it's been a miracle for us because we've gotten a large range of acceptance at the retail level. We're in Publix, we're in ABC, Target is picking it up, we're in Sedano's, we're in Bravo's, 7-Elevens are picking it up because they're concentrating more on craft beer and the Hispanic market. So what we're trying to do is do a quality beer, a high quality beer, more taste, and that the Hispanic community will like. Hi, I'm Danny Ramos and welcome to this week's edition of Hispanic Speak Out TV. I'm here with Greg Perkins, and Greg is an expert on education, and we're having some dialogues about racism and what's going on with the use of language in the United States right now because of the Charlottesville incident. We're on Spectrum Cable every Tuesday night at 9:30. We've been on the air for 14 consecutive years with Hispanic Speak Out. And we also produce Latina Role Models, which you can see after this show. And we also produce a show called EDU, hosted by Greg Perkins. Okay, you know, a lot of stuff going on in the news, Greg. There's a big movement right now on a college to take down all the statues, okay? And surprisingly enough, Chris Matthews, who's always been a very, very left person, anti-Trump person, came out, and we have a clip that we're going to run after our segment of what he said. And basically he said was, when is it going to stop? When are we going to stop, and where, taking down these statues? And do we rename all the George Washington universities and schools? Do we rename all the things for Jefferson because they had slaves? You know? So, and where does that movement stop? There's even a movement right now where a group of college kids want to had a mascot, and it's a horse for the football team. And that horse was named Traveler. And they want to rename the horse because coincidentally Traveler was the name of Robert E. Lee's horse. But there are a lot of horses named Traveler. There are a lot of horses. They ran some statistics, and there are thousands of horses named Traveler. It's a common name for a horse. But it's even going that far. It's even going that far. How do you feel about it?
Look, man, if something offends a group of people, right? You ever seen the Cleveland Indians mascot?
Yeah, sure. They went through that. I remember they went through that.
They still have that mascot.
Yeah.
They need to get rid of that mascot.
Yeah.
Washington Redskins, get rid of that. It's a racist term. If something offends somebody, get rid of it. That's not right. Okay, because...
Okay, so, good.
And you have to go by, why were these things created, right? I learned that a lot of those statues were put up during the 60s, during the civil rights movement, as a big fat middle finger to say, screw you, we're not giving you any rights.
Right.
Now, I don't have a problem with those things being in some type of museum, Danny. That's fine.
Yeah.
But if it's an institution that's publicly funded, like if I'm an African American, which I am, and you're paying taxes, I don't want to pay for that crap, right? And if you have it, put it in a museum somewhere.
But what about something like this extreme situation of this horse, this mascot, where they want to change the name of the mascot on a horse? You know, it's like, it looks like people are finding, you know, these little corners to say this is no good, this is no good. So where does the infringement of free speech come in? What do you do with George Washington? George Washington had slaves, right?
Yeah.
And so did Jefferson. They both owned slaves.
Right.
Madison. So most of the writers, the signers, Declaration of Independence, a lot of them had slaves.
Yeah, I think the big thing they're really focusing on the Southerners, right? These people were not very nice people. And I know Jefferson had slaves. I know Washington had slaves, right? But when they said, you know what, we got to end this, right? We need one perfect union. Robert E. Lee and those guys, they fought to keep slavery.
No, I'm with you on that.
So why should you idolize them?
No, I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that.
Okay.
I mean, it's idolizing is one thing, historical information is another.
Right.
So you take it, you put it into a museum, it becomes historical information.
Yeah, sure.
If you put it in a public park, it's saying it's an example for all the kids playing in that park. Look at this guy and how great he is.
Who, Robert E. Lee?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
wasn't great.
No, what
First
I'm
of all,
saying is
he
that's
lost,
what
yeah.
that's what taking a statue and putting it in a public park says.
Yeah.
The implication is he's in a public park with this big statue and it says, hey, this man is a great man. You know what I mean? So I'm with you on taking down all of those statues. I'm with you. And I'm
Yeah,
with you
okay.
on putting them into museums.
Yeah.
There's no problem with that.
Right.
But now it's going beyond that. Well, where will it stop? Because what do you do with George Washington? He had slaves. What do you now? With the George Washington thing and the Thomas Jefferson thing, they were the founders of the country. So they were dealing with an existing environment.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, they did have slaves. Yes, all men are created equal. There is a
Yeah.
conflict in what was written in the
Right.
Constitution,
Right.
but it was something that was brand new and moving forward.
Yeah, well, obviously you can't take down the Washington Monument, right? Or get rid of that big thing.
Well, people want to do that.
No,
They
you
want to
can't.
do that.
You can't take that thing. That's not even practical.
But what about changing the money, taking them off the dollar bill?
They probably should consider doing that, seriously.
Yeah.
Because I think they were thinking about putting Harriet Tubman on one of those pieces, right? Because they said if you're going to celebrate heroes, not why you don't see any statues of Harriet Tubman, Frederick Douglass, a lot of the white people who helped
I think
the
there are-
abolitionists.
Yeah,
right?
I think there are some statues, but not
But
prevalent.
those people were doing good
but not
things.
prevalent. They were
Yeah,
doing fantastic
They were doing
things.
good things, right?
Yeah.
Robert Lee wasn't doing anything good. Man had slaves, and there's some history where he had slaves, he beat them, and actually poured salt into their wounds. Why would you put a statue?
That's on the record?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
on the record.
Well, you know,
that is
he,
on the record.
he
man.
fought for the destruction of the United States to form a new country that was based upon slave labor.
Right.
You
right.
cannot eliminate that.
Right.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
So all of these guys, they should not be in public
But they
parks.
fought to keep slavery, right? No man should be enslaved.
They
no
fought.
man.
They were fighting to keep slavery
Sure.
because the economics
Yeah.
of the entire South, and we talked about that.
Yeah, but there are some
also.
things you're not going to do for economics, right? You're not going to stand on a street corner and sell drugs for economics. You're going to get out and you're going to work, or you're going to start a business, right? So don't tell me this
Well, there are
economic
people.
thing.
There are people that there are people. No, what I'm saying is that the whole Confederacy, the slave movement was based upon free labor.
Yes, I agree.
That was propping up the whole economy of all the southern states.
Right, but it also goes a little deeper than that too, Danny, right? I mean, you could just go and take somebody's kid. Some little girl grows up, she's looking pretty. You can just snatch her. So it's deeper than that, and you still
Yeah, it's
see
property.
the scars.
It's property.
You still see the scars of slavery in a lot of African Americans today. I'm not making an excuse because I think there are a lot of things out here that's available. But man, you can still see the scars of African Americans and why we have not made more economic progress than what we have. And a lot of that stuff still stems from slavery.
Well, it all stems from slavery.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It all stems from slavery.
Yeah.
I remember, and this is not to say something bad about George Bush the first, but I remember sitting in front of a TV set and they're doing a biography of him, of his life.
Right.
And they were interviewing him, and he was saying how in the 40s, his success in the business was that he traveled from state to state across the South selling his company. Okay?
Right.
Well, you couldn't do that if you were black.
That's right.
You
That's
couldn't
right.
do that if you were a person of color.
That's right.
So going across the South and he wasn't a political figure at that time, he was building into a wealthy businessman. But that is the difference, that he could have done it, but a black man or a person of color with the same concept, with the same skills, with the same abilities would not be able to do that.
Right.
So the whole concept, as you mentioned, of slavery is still there.
Oh, yeah,
bumped
it's
up
still
through
there,
the
sure,
40s,
yeah.
bumped up through the 50s.
Access. You don't have access to banks.
Economic
You
access.
don't have access to capital. I was reading a book. You know the story, John Appleseed? The
Yeah,
guy-
yeah.
Okay, the real story behind that guy, his name was Johnny something. It wasn't Appleseed. So, but basically, that had to do with homestead.
Yeah.
So what happened when the Europeans first started coming up and started taking the land from the Indians, they would say, any land that you plant apples or oranges on, that's your land. So Johnny Appleseed would just go around planting apple orchards, and then he would sell that to you. Now imagine all the money that guy made. He would just go literally take land, plant apples on it, sell it, right? And then he could take that money and pass it on.
Yeah.
You and I didn't have any inheritance like that.
No.
And so you wanted to say, oh, well, why can't black people work hard? Well, first of all, I got to get a job. You're going to give me one of these fancy
Well, black
jobs?
people did work hard as slaves. let me tell you.
They worked very hard.
They didn't
but
have
what
a
I'm
choice.
saying, but Danny, they were not at the top of the economic thing.
No.
Well, the money. I was looking at you last night. Jared Kushner, right before Trump became president, he got a $85 million loan from Deutsche Bank, personal. Personal. How can one person guarantee a $285 million loan?
Okay, so let's look at the situation now. As this concept perpetuates, because it's the foundation of slavery, even though it took 100 years, it took a war, and then 100 years later, we were still dealing with the Civil Rights Act.
Right.
Okay, so
Still dealing with it.
Yeah, still dealing with it because
You know that.
So yeah, because you know
that.
why? Because there are industries that the people in control of these industries have been in control of these industries. You may have an executive there for 30 years who's now president.
And they
An
don't look like
executive
me
there-
or you.
And the executive for 40 years.
That's right.
So that executive comes from the era. So now let's look
right.
at the boards of all the major corporations.
That's right.
How many people of color are sitting on the boards of all the major corporations?
None, if any.
Hardly, almost
none.
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 And
You can walk into any office building in Orlando, New York, Chicago, and you will not see anyone that looks like us except for maybe a secretary or the janitors.
Yeah.
When you
So-
go into that boardroom, you won't see
But
me
what
or
you're
you.
getting is now minorities are pushing into certain
That's right.
industries
Yeah.
and they're getting pushed back.
That's right.
Okay,
That's right.
and I know that personally.
Sure, I
I'm
know.
experiencing
I
that
know.
right now today personally in the beer industry.
Mm-hmm.
In the beer industry, when you walk into the executive boardrooms, there's nobody there of color.
That's right. That's
And
right.
when I'm trying to launch a beer right now, I'm getting pushback because
Mm-hmm.
I'm a Hispanic company. Because they don't want to give market share to a Hispanic company. Now that could be capitalism, but under the definition of federal law, that's considered economic racism against minorities.
Sure, that's right.
So this is a whole new vista of conflict, because people are talking about the names on statues, and I get that. The reality is that minorities are not being allowed to penetrate and grow in certain industries because those industries are still controlled by the
That's
guys
right.
who controlled them
That's right.
40 years ago.
And it's hard. I mean, a few have done it, but man, it
is hard. It is hard.
It is super difficult.
It is difficult.
I mean, even with it just seems like even when you play by the rules, Danny, you say, okay, Danny, you go to school, learn something, right? Danny, start a business. Danny, go fill out your paperwork. And you're still getting pushback. Right? Aren't you playing by the rules?
Listen,
Aren't you playing by the rules?
I'm playing by the law.
Yeah, you're playing
I'm
by the
getting
law.
a lot of pushback
Yeah.
because this industry has been traditionally controlled going back decades. So what happens? You change the demographic of the community.
That's right.
Now the community is, we got a lot of Hispanics coming in. Let's sell them our stuff.
Yep.
And then when a Hispanic comes in or a black comes in to sell a product to their own community, they get iced out. They get blocked.
Yep. Yep.
They get
smashed.
blocked.
Yeah. No.
And
no, I
that,
agree.
I'm going to test that. That could be, I think that's against federal law based upon racism. There's an economic component to racism.
Yeah, but Danny, these corporations, man, a lot of them are so big, and then like they just litigate you to death.
Oh yeah,
it's like litigation by
you have to
1,000
be able
cuts.
to stand the fight.
Yeah,
you have to be able to stand
and
the
most
fight.
small minority firms can't
Yeah,
stand that.
yeah.
So with those statutes coming down, Danny, at least that's something. That's a start that may trickle down.
Well, you know what
to
that
help
is?
address those type of issues.
That is the flag going up. That's the giving the notice.
Yeah.
That minorities are very conscious of racism that still exists in this country, no matter what people say. Okay, still, by the
And
way,
like you say, economic racism.
by the way,
That's legal.
economic racism is where it's at right now.
Yeah.
Because it's all about giving people economic opportunity.
That's right.
That's what it's all about. This is Danny Ramos. We're going to take a break right now. We're going to bring you segments of what's been going on in the community and in the nation and the world for the Hispanic community. We'll be right back. Tap rooms are localized and they're geographic. The Hispanic community is much broader than one tap room. So what we decided to do was come out with a high-quality craft beer, 2 high-quality craft beers that appeal to the Hispanic taste and that we can distribute in all the Hispanic neighborhoods. Taino is a very light, refreshing beer. It's a social beer that you can drink probably for a good part of the evening, and it'll give you a nice light feeling. It's not a heavy beer, it's very airy. and it's very light. It's a 4.5 alcohol, which is low for beer. The Boricua is a 6.0. Now that's a stronger beer, and we designed it to be a little bit stronger than Heineken. Heineken is a favorite in the Hispanic community, so we have a little bit more muscle than Heineken. Boricua right now, in a very short amount of time, it's been a miracle for us because we've gotten a large range of acceptance at the retail level. We're in Publix, we're in ABC, Target is picking it up, we're in Sedano's, we're in Bravo's, 7-Elevens are picking it up because they're concentrating more on craft beer and the Hispanic market. So what we're trying to do is do a quality beer, a high quality beer, more taste, and that the Hispanic community will like. Step up to craft beer. Taino Light Lager has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean-style flavor. Boricua Craft Ale, full-bodied flavor for the true beer drinker. Stop drinking beer water. Taino Craft Light Lager and Boricua Strong Craft Ale. Feel the rhythm and come up to craft beer.
I am for the child who's had 7 addresses in a single year because she's in foster care, because her father abused her. And her mother couldn't believe her. She is the child I am for. I am a volunteer child advocate. I am you.
Florida residents call toll-free 866-341-1425.
Last night, accusing the media, of course, of attempting to take away the country's heritage. He also repeated his claim that people are trying to take down statues of figures like George Washington. Let's watch.
George Washington, please don't take his statue down, please. Please. Does anybody want George Washington's statue? No. Is that sad? Is that whole sad? To Lincoln, to Teddy Roosevelt. I see they want to take Teddy Roosevelt's down too. They're trying to figure out why. They don't know. They're trying to take away our culture. They're trying to take away our history. And our weak leaders, they do it overnight.
Well, the violence in Charlottesville reignited calls for cities to remove Confederate statues, of course. And today, Charlottesville covered up their statue of Robert E. Lee. There they are putting a shroud over the general. But presidential historian John Meacham argues that you can't conflate our country's founders with someone like Lee, who fought against the country. In an opinion piece in the New York Times, he wrote, "The answer to Mr. Trump's question begins with a straightforward test. Was the person to whom a monument is erected on public property devoted to the American experiment in liberty and self-government? By definition, the Confederate hierarchy fails that test, and those who took up arms against the Union were explicitly attempting to stop the American Odyssey." Meacham points out that monuments in public places of veneration to those who believed it were their duty to fight the Union have no place in the Union of the 21st century, a view with which Lee himself might have agreed. "I think it wiser," Lee wrote in 1866, just after the war, "not to keep open the sores of war." That was Robert E. Lee writing. He is an example of the Tennessee Capitol bust of Nathan Bedford Forrest, an early KKK leader and Confederate general who ordered his troops to massacre black soldiers, writing, "We need not contort ourselves to find Forrest wanting as an object of veneration. He was condemned for outrages and atrocities in his own time." I'm joined right now by presidential historian John Meacham. John, I love to hear a voice from the South talk about this because I think I did go to Chapel Hill for a year. I did understand the feeling, and it was so complex, some of it. You know, the sign-off on the local TV station was a very slow rendering of Dixie. I got it. It's about loss. It's about loss, a regional loss. It wasn't about, at least at that point, about slavery. I get a sense they talked about the building on campus at Chapel Hill where they housed the the Union soldiers' horses during the war down there. So there's a lot of pain, a lot of sadness. We're talking here about celebration. Celebration. What place does it have in our current environment? Celebration of Southern generals.
Right. I would draw a distinction between celebration and commemoration. I think that you can commemorate the past. We should commemorate the past without mindlessly exalting figures who are at best complex and at worst simply not worthy of veneration.
Let's talk about this thing that Trump's trying to trump up here, and I think he is trumping it up, literally. Nobody's going after Teddy Roosevelt, and the idea of going after slave owners, you'd have to basically take away our history, because the first 6 presidents or so had slaves. You'd have to go after people like Washington, and of course, all the Southern guys, all the ones who followed him, Madison, and of course Monroe and the rest, and of course old Hickory because of his Indian fighting and killing. Where do we stop? Where do we stop at saying we're going to recognize our history, accept it for what it was, and move on? And when are we going to say, no, some of it has to be decelebrated, taken away from our site?
Right. Well, the test, I've wrestled with this for a long time. As you say, I grew up on a Civil War battlefield. I've written biographies of Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson. So this is not new territory for me. My sense is you draw the line at public veneration with those who were ultimately devoted to the journey toward a more perfect union versus those who wanted to end that journey. And the Confederate hierarchy was explicitly about ending that journey and beginning their own balkanized country with a different understanding of human liberty. And we can argue and talk for the rest of the year about a sense of tragedy, a sense of Southern identity, the fact that most Confederate soldiers didn't own slaves, any number of things. We can talk, and it's fascinating, and it's our story. It's what Shelby Foote called the crossroads of our being. But we're in the 21st century. This is public property. And it seems to me that George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, James Monroe, James Madison, they are worthy of being both commemorated and celebrated because they were devoted to a project that ultimately led, it took too long, it took too much bloodshed, but it ultimately led to the great achievements of 1964 and 1965, and that wouldn't have been possible, most likely, if we had stopped the experiment in 1865.
Tap rooms are localized and they're geographic. The Hispanic community is much broader than one tap room. So what we decided to do was come out with a high-quality craft beer, 2 high-quality craft beers that appeal to the Hispanic taste and that we can distribute in all the Hispanic neighborhoods. Taino is a very light, refreshing beer. It's a social beer that you can drink probably for a good part of the evening, and it'll give you a nice light feeling. It's not a heavy beer, it's very airy, and it's very light. It's a 4.5 alcohol, which is low for beer. The Boricua is a 6.0. Now that's a stronger beer, and we designed it to be a little bit stronger than Heineken. Heineken is a favorite in the Hispanic community, so we have a little bit more muscle than Heineken. Boricua right now, in a very short amount of time, it's been a miracle for us because we've gotten a large range of acceptance at the retail level. We're in Publix, we're in ABC, Target is picking it up, we're in Sedano's, we're in Bravo's, 7-Elevens are picking it up because they're concentrating more on craft beer and the Hispanic market. So what we're trying to do is do a quality beer, a high quality beer, more taste, and that the Hispanic community will like. Step up to craft beer. Taino Light Lager has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean-style flavor. Boricua Craft Ale, full-bodied flavor for the true beer drinker. Stop drinking beer water. Taino Craft Light Lager and Boricua Strong Craft Ale. Feel the rhythm and come up to craft beer.
I am for the child who's had 7 addresses in a single year because she's in foster care, because her father abused her. And her mother couldn't believe her. She is the child I am for. I am a volunteer child advocate. I am you.
Florida residents call toll-free 866-341-1425.
Hola Florida, introducing Boricua Beer and Taino Light Beer. Boricua and Taino Light are crafted beers that are rich in flavors and brewed right here in Florida. Taino beer has a crisp, refreshing Caribbean flavor style when enjoyed chilled. Boricua beer is a craft ale with full body flavor that is a beer drinker's beer. Boricua and Taino Light Beers. Enjoy responsibly.